They scour the land, seeking to have those of power and fame mention their name and get behind their efforts to become elected officials. Quite often, they could care less what anyone thinks of those people. All they want is that endorsement, the name value. And when the election has been held, tell their political lemmings to get lost because they don't have that cushy job waiting for them that they once promised. It's all about payoffs, paybacks, and endorsements, leading one to wonder what history tells us about those who lend their name, their fame, and sometimes their behind-the-scenes assistance to those desiring to become your president. Welcome back to the New York Times bestselling author, whose most recent tome is Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, presidential historian Craig Shirley. Craig, good to see you again. And let's start right out here with what everybody is talking about right now. Sarah Palin comes out, puts her endorsement behind Donald Trump. Some say he's got it, that's it, it's all over. Others saying, really, Sarah Palin? So let's start with the obvious. Does an endorsement really make a massive difference historically?
In the context of history, Ed, no. Now, if you go back to the 1800s, is that Henry Clay's endorsement of Martin Van Buren over Andrew Jackson was thought to deliver the election to Martin Van Buren. And Andrew Jackson called it the corrupt bargain. In later years, endorsements have become less and less valuable. I recall in 1976 when Barry Goldwater endorsed incumbent Jerry Ford over the challenger Ronald Reagan, and that meant a lot. But I think in the current modern era, is with all the cacophony of information and news and websites and cable systems and talk radio and all that, is that it's hard to cut through. I think also too is that endorsements work best when they're a little bit counterproductive, and she's really appealing to his existing voters. So I'm not sure that it's going to add a lot. Plus, I'm not sure that she has the cachet that she used to have with Republican primary voters. Look, on balance, it's a good thing for Donald Trump. An old political pro once said that politics is motion, and Donald Trump understands that as well as any politician I've ever seen since Ronald Reagan. And so this definitely keeps him in motion. So on balance, it's a good thing, but it's not going to sway many voters.
Is part of the downside of it is the mocking factor, I call it, because you mentioned years ago how maybe it would have made a difference. And here we have so many outlets now. Look, Saturday Night Live is going to do this on Saturday. It is going to be mocked on YouTube. It is going to be all over Facebook. It's all over Twitter. You're going to have comedians who are going to make hay on this on every single one of the late night shows. So in the end, doesn't it become less effective, though? And it can hurt you more often because that kind of mocking can really damage a candidate, not just the person giving the endorsement, but the candidate themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Candidates have been devastated by bad jokes in the past. Tom Dewey was devastated in 1952 when he was described as looking like the little man who looked like he belonged on top of a wedding cake, and a lot of people thought that's why he lost to Harry Truman, because there was kind of a weak quality to Tom Dewey. So humor can be devastating in American politics. It remains to be seen how this plays out. I can't imagine. I think you're right. I think it's going to be mostly negative humor. It remains to be seen whether or not that has an impact on Republican primary voters, or whether, because that type of humor is more aimed at a liberal audience.
45 seconds. You believe that Donald Trump may be bringing us a new era of conservatism, but that's kind of interesting because a lot of people claim he's not a committed conservative to begin with here, and he's the least likely to basically push the conservative base forward.
Yeah, and I do. I'm glad you brought that up. He's in some ways almost a Richard Nixon conservative in that he is waging a cultural war. And I saw him yesterday rallying on about Christmas not being used in popular culture anymore. He's not really going after the institutions of Washington, but he is going after the culture of America. And in a way, that's kind of a throwback to Richard Nixon's campaign of 1968. So nobody could disagree that Richard Nixon was a man of the right, but whether or not he was an American conservative in the mold of Ronald Reagan is a different matter. So he is a conservative, but it's not. I'm not sure he's a conservative of the future.
Remember what history tells us, Craig, and you know this as well as I do. The more you say it over and over again, keep saying the same thing over and over again, whether it's true or not, it eventually does become fact. Welcome to history. Remind everybody once again, the fascinating book is Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, who will be talked about a whole lot more as we head towards November as well. Craig Shirley, thanks so much, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. We know a little more about what killed a rock and roll legend recently, and it speaks to the need for help in saving millions of Americans. Next on The Hardline.